In the shadowed corridors of history, where marble halls once echoed with the march of legions and the proclamations of emperors, the greatest empires have always concealed a hidden fragility. Beneath the gleaming armor of power, intricate systems of supply, loyalty, and control hummed like fragile glass beneath a conqueror's boot. One such empire, the mighty Roman dominion that stretched from the windswept hills of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of North Africa, stood as a colossus for centuries. Yet its fall was not a thunderclap of sudden war, but a slow unraveling, woven from the very threads that once bound it together. Viewers today still feel the weight of that collapse, for in its story lies a mirror to our own age of towering institutions and unspoken vulnerabilities. The Roman Empire did not shatter in a single battle. It eroded from within, its systems of grain, gold, and governance cracking under pressures few could see until the silence of empty forums became deafening. Imagine the daily rhythm of life in the 2nd century, when Rome appeared invincible. Merchants haggled in bustling forums under the watchful gaze of marble gods, their voices mingling with the clatter of carts laden with wheat from Egypt and spices from the east. Farmers in the Italian countryside tended olive groves that had fed generations, while legionaries patrolled borders secured by treaties and fear. In the grand villas of the elite, slaves moved silently through frescoed halls, preparing feasts illuminated by oil lamps that cast flickering shadows on tales of past glories. Citizens gathered in public baths, steam rising as they debated philosophy and politics, the aqueducts delivering endless fresh water from distant mountains. This was the surface brilliance of an empire, built on engineering marvels, legal codes, and military discipline. The Pax Romana promised stability, a golden age where trade routes pulsed like arteries carrying lifeblood across continents. Yet beneath this ordered existence, a soil of prosperity was thinning, and the roots of empire grew shallow, without the constant nourishment of expansion and tribute. Early warning signs flickered like distant lightning on the horizon, invisible to most who lived within the empire's embrace. As borders stabilized, the flow of captured wealth slowed, straining the vast bureaucracy that depended on endless conquests for slaves and silver. Inflation crept in as emperors debased coins, mixing base metals into the once pure denarius, eroding trust in the very currency that fueled commerce. In the provinces, overtaxed farmers abandoned fields, their yields diminishing under heavy levies meant to sustain distant legions. Corruption spread through the ranks of officials, where bribes replaced merit and loyalty fractured, along lines of personal ambition. Climate shifts brought drier seasons to North Africa, Rome's breadbasket, subtly reducing harvests, while population pressures mounted in overcrowded cities. Plague visited intermittently, carrying away laborers and soldiers alike, yet these were dismissed as temporary woes in an empire that had survived worse. No one understood what was coming next, for the machinery of state still turned, its gears grinding with deceptive strength. Rising tension coiled through the 3rd century like a gathering storm. Barbarian tribes pressed against frontiers, not as mere raiders, but as desperate migrants fleeing their own upheavals, demanding land and gold. Emperors rose and fell in rapid succession, assassinated or overthrown by ambitious generals, each promising restoration while deepening divisions. The army, once a professional force of disciplined citizens, became a mercenary machine, loyal to paymasters rather than the Senate or the people. Trade routes frayed as pirates and highwaymen grew bolder, disrupting the grain ships that fed Rome's million inhabitants. In the eastern provinces, religious fervor clashed with traditional cults, fracturing social cohesion as new faiths challenged the imperial cult that had unified diverse peoples. Economic strain forced higher taxes, sparking revolts in Gaul and along the Danube, where local strongmen carved out semi-independent domains. The empire's vastness, once its greatest asset, now revealed its fragility. Communication lagged, decisions from the capital arrived too late, and regional governors prioritized survival over loyalty. The system that had conquered the known world now struggled to feed itself. Key decisions and mounting pressures accelerated the descent. Diocletian's division of the empire into eastern and western halves sought to manage its unwieldy scale, but it created rival centers of power that drained resources in competition. Constantine's embrace of Christianity shifted the spiritual foundation, redirecting wealth toward churches, while pagan temples crumbled, alienating traditional elites. Massive building projects and frontier fortifications consumed silver that could no longer be easily replenished, leading to desperate requisitions from an exhausted peasantry. Alliances with barbarian groups, once tactical necessities, invited warriors into the heart of the empire as foederati, auxiliary troops whose loyalty proved conditional at best. Mistakes compounded, ignoring the growing autonomy of provincial elites, failing to reform the tax system that crushed smallholders into serfdom, and underestimating the migratory waves driven by Hunnic pressures from the steppes. These choices, born of immediate crises, eroded the centralized authority that had defined Roman might. The delicate balance between military might, economic vitality, and cultural unity tilted irreversibly. The moment the system began to fail arrived not with dramatic trumpets, but through cascading breakdowns in the late 4th and early 5th centuries. In 378, at Adrianople, a Roman army suffered catastrophic defeat against Gothic forces, exposing the military's vulnerabilities and emboldening further incursions. Grain shipments faltered as North African provinces faced unrest, leading to famine in Rome where bread rations dwindled and riots erupted in the streets. Visigoths under Alaric, once allies, turned against the empire, culminating in the sack of Rome in 410, a psychological blow that shattered the myth of invincibility. Rivers of refugees flooded into cities already strained by plague and economic collapse, overwhelming infrastructure. Aqueducts fell into disrepair, baths emptied, and forums grew silent as commerce contracted. The Western Empire's emperors became puppets of barbarian generals, their edicts hollow amid shrinking territories. What had been invisible fractures now yawned as chasms. Supply chains severed, loyalty evaporated, and the intricate web of roads, laws, and legions that held the Colossus upright began to snap one by one. Human consequences unfolded in waves of chaos and despair that reshaped societies overnight. Families fled burning villas, carrying what little they could as bands of raiders looted the countryside. In once thriving cities, markets stood empty, artisans abandoned crafts, and knowledge preserved in scrolls gathered dust as literacy declined. Hunger stalked the provinces, driving people into banditry or servitude under local warlords who offered protection in exchange for fealty. Social bonds frayed. Slaves revolted or simply walked away, while the elite retreated to fortified estates, their cosmopolitan world narrowing to survival. Epidemics swept through weakened populations, claiming lives indiscriminately, and leaving ghost towns where laughter once echoed. Fear became the new currency, with rumors of approaching hordes spreading faster than any official decree. Yet, amid the breakdown, pockets of resilience emerged, monasteries preserving fragments of learning, communities forging new alliances. But the grandeur of imperial life faded into memory, replaced by a harsher, more localized existence. The common people who had known only the empire's shadow now faced a world without its certainties. The long-term historical impact rippled across centuries, fundamentally altering the trajectory of Western civilization. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476, when the last emperor was deposed, marked not just the end of an era, but the birth of medieval Europe. Fragmented kingdoms rose on Roman ruins, blending Germanic customs with lingering Latin traditions and Christian faith. Trade networks contracted dramatically, ushering in localized economies and the feudal order that defined the Middle Ages. Classical knowledge survived in Byzantine enclaves and Islamic scholarship, later fueling the Renaissance. But the immediate centuries saw technological regression, from lost engineering techniques to diminished urban life. Borders redrawn by migration reshaped ethnic landscapes, planting seeds for modern nations. The collapse demonstrated how interconnected systems, military, economic, agricultural, could amplify small failures into systemic ruin, a lesson echoed in later empires from the Maya to the Ottomans. Rome's legacy endured in law, language, and infrastructure, yet its fragility warned that no power is eternal when its foundations weaken. Even as the dust settled on abandoned forums, the echoes of Rome's collapse haunted subsequent civilizations, revealing patterns of hubris and systemic blindness. Empires that followed often repeated the cycle: overextension, internal rot, environmental strain, and external shocks. The Byzantine remnant endured longer by adapting, but it too eventually yielded. In the silence of ruined amphitheaters overgrown with vines, one senses the impermanence of human constructs. What remains is a profound reminder that strength projected outward often masks vulnerabilities within. Currency debasement, elite detachment, supply fragility, cultural fragmentation. These forces operate quietly, accumulating until a tipping point arrives. Historians sift through coins and inscriptions, piecing together how daily routines of taxation, farming, and governance unraveled, transforming a superpower into a collection of successor states. The story endures because it feels intimately familiar, a cautionary mirror held to any society convinced of its permanence. Through the lens of time, the fragile systems behind strong empires expose a universal truth about human endeavors. No matter the scale of legions or monuments, reliance on finite resources, fragile loyalties, and complex logistics invites rupture when conditions shift. Rome's aqueducts still stand in fragments, symbols of ingenuity and eventual neglect. Its roads, once arteries of empire, now trace paths for new journeys. The collapse was a process of transformation, painful and protracted, birthing a different world from the ashes. As we navigate our own interconnected age of global supply chains and political unions, the Roman experience whispers of hidden cracks. The forums may be empty, but their lessons resonate. Vigilance against complacency, reform before crisis, and recognition that even the mightiest structures rest on foundations that demand constant care. In that haunting continuity lies both warning and hope. The civilizations that learn from rupture may yet endure longer than those that ignore it.